We work in the dark to serve the light. You know, that was the first motto. Pretty dramatic stuff from South Korea's main intelligence agency back in 1961.
Quite a statement, yeah. And it's definitely different from their current one.
Totally. And they've had a few names over the years, too. So welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into the really compelling, sometimes pretty complicated story of this organization, which we now know as the National Intelligence Service, or NIS.
And you've shared a fantastic amount of information with us.
We have. And our goal here is really to unpack the crucial bits, where it started, the big turning points, right up to what it does today in South Korea.
Basically trying to give you a clear picture of this really powerful body and its impact.
Exactly. So we'll look at the origins, the changes, those key events, and, yes, the controversies and what its mission looks like now, really getting into the nitty-gritty.
You know, what's really striking looking at the material is how the agency's evolution kind of mirrors South Korea's own story. Well, you see the country move from this period of, really strong authoritarian rule towards the democracy it is today. And the intelligence agency's history is just deeply, deeply tangled up in that whole transition.
Oh, I see.
So we'll trace that. We'll look at the huge power it had initially, the scandals, and these ongoing attempts to sort of reshape its role in a more democratic system.
Okay, consider this your streamlined guide then, from its Cold War roots to stuff happening practically yesterday. We'll cover the different names, the big moments, and what they're supposed to be doing now. So let's dive in.
Right.
It all kicks off in 1961 with the Korean Central Intelligence Agency, the KCIA.
Right.
But it wasn't like it appeared out of thin air, right? There was something before it.
That's correct, yeah. The groundwork was laid during the Korean War, actually, with the Korean Counterintelligence Corps, the KCIC.
Okay.
So that core idea of security, of intelligence gathering, it was there from quite early on.
Got it. And then this key figure comes along, Kim Jong-pil. He starts the KCIA June 13th, 1961. And his connection to Park Chung-hee is really important here.
Super important. He was Park's nephew by marriage, but more than that, he was the guy who masterminded the '61 coup that brought Park to power.
Wow, okay. So the politics were baked in from day one.
Absolutely. And the first group of people, about 3,000 of them, a lot came straight from that earlier KCIC.
And their job description initially sounds pretty extensive.
Oh, it was huge. The KCIA was set up to supervise and coordinate everything international intelligence, domestic intelligence, and criminal investigations by all government intelligence agencies. That includes the military, too.
So basically all intelligence roads led to the KCIA.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That kind of concentration of power in one place right at the start, well, you can see how that might affect things later on.
No kidding. And it sounds like it didn't take long for the KCIA to become a major player, especially under President Park. They were very active in suppressing dissent.
Very active. Anyone seen as anti-government, pro-North Korea, pro-communist student protesters, even Koreans living abroad, they were targets.
Right.
And the agency quickly got this reputation for, well, meddling. In domestic politics, international stuff, often going way beyond what its original charter, the act concerning protection of military secrets actually allows.
That act was mostly about spies and national security, wasn't it?
Exactly. Counterespionage, protecting secrets. But the sources make it clear a huge chunk of the KCIA's actual work and its budget went to other things entirely. And this is where it gets quite dark.
Okay, tell me.
Well, take 1968. KCIA agents kidnapped 17 Koreans living in West Germany.
Kidnapped them.
Yeah. Abducted, flown back to Seoul, tortured, accused of being pro-North. It caused a massive international incident. West Germany almost cut off diplomatic ties.
Incredible.
Then, fast forward to 73, the even more famous case, kidnapping Kim Dae-jung from Japan.
Yeah.
A major dissident who, amazingly, later becomes president and wins the Nobel Peace Prize.
Just grabbed him from another country.
Yes. These incidents really show the kind of, almost limitless power they seem to have, and what happens when there's no real oversight.
Unchecked feels like the right word. The picture painted is one of, well, pervasive fear. This power to just arrest and detain people.
It led to frequent detentions, torture, students, politicians, journalists, anyone critical, really.
But it wasn't just about cracking down, was it? It sounds like their role ballooned into other areas, too.
Oh, absolutely. Beyond intelligence, it was like a shadow attorney general and inspector general. But then, weirdly, also a patron of the arts. a tourism promoter,
Mm-hmm.
even shaping national culture.
That's unexpected.
Right. It became this kind of all-powerful arm of the state involved in almost everything.
And how did they pay for all this? It
Us-
wasn't exactly coming out of the regular government budget transparently, I imagine.
Not at all. They used methods like extortion, manipulating the stock market.
Seriously.
Yeah. And that money wasn't just for use at home. It funded bribes internationally. The big one was the Koreagate scandal in the U.S. in the 70s,
Ah, I've heard of that.
involving Tong Sun Park, members of the U.S. Congress. It shows how this mix of security, corruption, and illegal stuff just blurred all the lines.
So this massively powerful, deeply embedded agency, and then boom, 1979, President Park is assassinated. By whom?
By the head of the KCIA himself, Kim Jae-kyu.
The director killed the president.
Wow, exactly. A huge shock. It led to a big shakeup, a purge within the KCIA. Kim Jae-kyu and others were executed. The agency definitely lost some power temporarily right after that.
But only temporarily, because by 1981, there's a new president, Chun-Doo-hwan, a new republic, the fifth, and a new name for the Agency for National Security Planning, ANSP.
That's right. Rebranded.
But did the rebrand mean a real change in direction? It sounds like there were still some strong similarities to the KCIA days.
That's a really key point. New name, same game in some ways. The ANSP kept that focus on North Korea, sure, but also on cracking down on activists inside South Korea. And just like the KCIA, the ANSP got involved in things beyond pure intelligence domestic politics again, even promoting the '88 Seoul Olympics. And unfortunately, the reports of human rights abuses, torture, messing with elections, those continue too.
But there were some moves to, define its job more clearly. In '81, it was officially made the main intelligence agency.
Yes, exactly. March '81. It became the central hub, officially. All other intel bodies had to coordinate with the ANSP.
Okay.
And by the end of '81, there was new legislation spelling out its legal functions. Info on communist threats, plots against the government, protecting secrets, investigating specific national security crimes. So, on paper, at least, a clearer mandate.
And sound like by '83, it was back on top as the #1 intelligence agency.
It bounced back pretty quickly, yeah.
But South Korea itself was changing, right?
Yeah.
More pressure for democracy. Did that start to reign in the ANSP at all?
It did, to some extent. Under the Sixth Republic, some domestic powers were clipped. ANSP agents were pulled out of the National Assembly, the Seoul Criminal Court, the Supreme Court.
So less direct influence on laws and courts.
Right. A noticeable step. But it's interesting. Even with those changes, the ANSP's budget, still secret, still not really open to scrutiny by the National Assembly.
Not until much later, right? July '89.
Exactly. 18 years. That's how long it took for the National Assembly to conduct its first proper inspection and audit. It really shows that ongoing push and pull between the agency's power and public accountability.
And that audit, it led to some other changes, too, trying to curb its political influence.
It did. That ANSP Information Coordination Committee, which had been criticized for leaning on other investigators, that got disbanded. And because of all the human rights criticism, they set up an internal watchdog office inside the ANSP to supposedly oversee domestic investigations.
But even with these reforms on paper, did the political meddling actually stop? The sources suggest maybe not.
It seems not entirely, no. Even in 1990, you still had complaints about intelligence maneuvering, things like wiretapping, surveillance. It's hard to change the culture of an organization that powerful overnight.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And they kept enforcing laws against anything seen as pro-North Korea, even when agreements were maybe suggesting they should ease up, and even when their main legal job was supposed to be stopping actual attempts to overthrow the government.
Okay, so the domestic side remained controversial. But what about its core intelligence work? Foreign intel, counter-espionage.
That side of things was generally seen as pretty good, actually. Highly regarded. And it was the main source for analysis on reunification strategy, dealing with North Korea, counter-espionage, stopping foreign spies. They were considered vital for that.
Right, so a mixed bag. Then another big change in '94. Another revision to its rules.
Yep, another significant charter revision, again, aiming to limit its activities, setting up a National Assembly Information Committee, specifically to try and ensure political neutrality, provide more oversight. And the agency started formally developing ways to tackle international crime and terrorism, which were growing concerns.
And they moved house in '95.
They did. Moved headquarters to Naegakdong, South Seoul. Maybe a symbolic fresh start.
And by '98, this thing was enormous.
Right.
Estimated 60,000 employees.
Huge budget. Massive organization, yeah. Spread across dozens of departments. Budget figures still weren't public, but definitely substantial.
So this whole ANSP period, it feels like this constant battle between trying to reform it and its continued massive influence.
That's a good way to put it. Which brings us to 1999 and name change number 3, the one we know today, the National Intelligence Service, NIS.
Okay, NIS. This renaming feels like maybe a more serious attempt this time, especially with South Korea being more solidly democratic under the Sixth Republic. Was there a real push for reform?
It seems so, yeah. Especially under President Roh Moo-hyun, he appointed Ko Young-koo, a human rights lawyer, as the director. That sent a very strong signal.
A human rights lawyer running the spy agency.
Exactly. And there were concrete plans. Get rid of the Anti-Communist Bureau inside NIS, shift a lot of the domestic spying stuff over to the National Police.
And the official mission statement reflected that.
It did. Focused on gathering and sharing info for national strategy and security, protecting secrets, investigating national security crimes like treason or espionage, and crimes involving NIS staff, coordinating information, trying to define its lane more clearly.
But there's always a but with this story, isn't there?
Yeah.
Despite the reforms, the controversies didn't stop.
Unfortunately not. The sources are very clear about the NIS getting caught manipulating public opinion during the 2012 presidential election.
Right, to help Park Geun-hye win.
Yeah, using cyber operations. It even led to a former spy chief, Won Si-hoon, going to prison. And the NIS actually admitted its role in this later, in 2017. It shows how deep-rooted that political interference was.
That's pretty damning. And there was other stuff, too, buying spyware.
Yeah, the hacking team's spyware purchase in 2015 raised huge concerns about surveillance powers, plus accusations that during Lee Byung-bak's time, the agency was secretly directing conservative activist groups.
So this constant struggle for neutrality and staying within legal lines just kept going.
Exactly. Which leads to another key moment. The amendment to the National Security Law in December 2020.
Okay, what did that do? That law itself was controversial, right?
Yeah.
Meant to protect against North Korea, but sometimes used against dissenters.
Precisely. The amendment was specifically aimed at stopping the NIS from meddling in domestic politics. It formally transferred its powers to investigate domestic security issues to the National Police. That transfer just took effect this year, January 1st, 2024.
So the police now handle those domestic investigations, not the NIS.
That's the idea. But, concerns remain. The NIS can still collect information about national security law violations, even if they don't investigate directly. And then you had the bribery convictions of several former NIS directors linked to the Park Geun-hye scandals.
Right, illegally sending NIS money to the president's office.
Exactly. Shows the ongoing challenge of accountability.
And we also saw the formal handover of investigating North Korean activities inside South Korea to the police back in December 2020. And just recently, February 2024, there's this investigation about potential tech theft involving the KF-21 fighter jet program.
Yes, with Indonesian engineers, possibly involving NIS and military counterintelligence. So yeah, it's still very much in the news, still under scrutiny.
The number of scandals over the decades is just, wow.
It really is remarkable. From the eavesdropping stuff under Kim Dae-jung to the 2012 election meddling, the illegal funding under Park Geun-hye, even Lee Myung-bak admitting he got NIS funds. These things massively shape public perception.
Definitely. But beyond the controversies, it does have crucial, maybe less visible jobs,
Right.
like cybersecurity.
Oh, absolutely vital. Overseeing national cybersecurity policy, defending against cyber attacks, investigating hacks, analyzing threats. They even run security checks on IT products used by the government. That's a huge critical role now.
And of course, North Korea. That's still a main focus.
It's still core, yeah. Providing intelligence for government strategy towards the North, watching for provocations, analyzing the relationship, all aimed at, supporting the long-term goal of a unified Korea.
Though they've faced criticism sometimes for getting things wrong about North Korea, like missing Kim Jong-il's death or inaccurate reports.
They have, but it's an incredibly tough target. As a former deputy director, Ra Jong-yeol pointed out, North Korea is intensely secretive, and the NIS itself is under way more public scrutiny than it used to be.
That's fair. It's got to be hard.
And in 2016, the government actually voted to reduce the NIS role even further in North Korea intel activities, again, shifting more investigation duties to the police. It's part of that ongoing redefinition.
And just quickly, the mottos changing over time, that's interesting too, like snapshots of the political mood.
Definitely reflects the different eras, and we can't forget that huge controversy around the 2000 Inter-Korean Summit.
The $500 million.
Yeah, allegations that government and Hyundai money, channeled somehow through the agency, was used to basically buy that summit. It led to a massive scandal, arrests, and even rumors it helped Kim Dae-jung get his Nobel Peace Prize.
Wow. That really shows the messy intersection of spying, politics, money, international relations.
It really does. So, looking back over this whole history, you can definitely see a clear arc of development.
Absolutely. From that super powerful, almost omnipresent KCIA to today's NIS trying to find its place in a more democratic South Korea,
Mm.
its whole story just mirrors the country's own political journey. You see how its job, its power, its reputation, it's all been constantly reshaped by reforms from within and pressures from outside.
And what really stands out when you look at the whole thing is how an agency originally set up to protect military secrets got so deeply involved in domestic politics.
Yeah.
I mean, drafting constitutional changes, funding political parties,
Yeah.
it really highlights the unique and sometimes pretty troubling path it's taken.
Well, hopefully this deep dive has given you, our listener, a clearer picture of the NIS, its complicated past, and where it stands today.
Which leaves us with a big question for you to think about. With the ongoing tensions on the Korean Peninsula and, all the new kinds of security threats in the digital age, how do you think the role of an agency like the NIS might need to change in the future?
Yeah. And what are the biggest challenges in trying to balance national security needs with protecting basic individual freedoms in that kind of environment? Something to definitely mull over.